So I guess first of all, I believe myself and Brianna have both read your bio and know a little bit about you, but I kind of want to just put it out there for some of our viewers and such. And if you could just give us a piece of your story or whatever you're kind of comfortable with, and how you found ABA.
Awesome. So just for everybody to get to know me more, my name is Michelle VinoKurov. I'm an autistic young adult and self-advocate. I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 in Brooklyn, New York. My parents noticed that when I was like 1 year old and a little bit over the age of 1, that I wasn't meeting developmental milestones compared to my older sister. So they knew things were like kind of different already from the start, but they didn't know that it was autism. First of all, they would notice that I would never respond to whenever they called my name. I never responded at all, zero. I was very sensitive with loud noises, that I would always cover my ears up. I would just like hide myself because it was just so loud and everything. And sometimes there were times that if we were going for walks and stuff, that if there was a fire trucks out, then I wouldn't react at all. Also, lack of eye contact. I did not really show eye contact that much growing up, but yeah, those were just some of the signs that my parents noticed, but they didn't know it was autism. So first we went to my pediatrician recommended for us to go to a audiologist to find out with my hearing. My hearing was perfectly fine. And then to my pediatrician, my parents took me back to the pediatrician and were like, this is a bigger issue. We gotta take her to a neurologist now because this is definitely more serious than what it is. So I had a neurologist evaluate me, and that's how I got my autism diagnosis so early on. And this was back in the year of 2000. So I was only about 2 years old at the time. But then my parents got me early intervention services following my autism diagnosis. And I think that's what really, the early intervention services for me have really helped me a lot in my life. I had a lot of communication challenges as well. I did not speak my first word verbally until I was 6 years old. And I didn't fully communicate in sentences until I was 10. So the services that I've gone speech therapy, physical, occupational, and ABA therapy. I had a mix of all. But what really got me into ABA therapy the most, it's not just my personal experiences, it was more of my professional. After I got my associate's degree from my community college, I came across with getting work into the school district. This one classroom I was working in as a paraprofessional, I was working in an autism self-contained classroom. And this classroom was doing ABA therapy in a public school setting. So I was helping students with individualized programs, working on specific skills, such as with functional communication. We were doing DTT to even naturalistic teaching, with ordering meals in the cafeteria, whatever their communication style is, that's what we were trying to push with. And so that pushed me to pursue my work in ABA. So I went back for my bachelor's degree. I pursued it through Purdue University Global. I graduated last year in October, so I'm a new undergrad. And from there, now today, I have multiple jobs. I'm now in Florida, so I've been in Florida with my family for a couple of years now. It was a big change for me as is, but it did help me career-wise because now I have multiple jobs. I work full-time for a public school district here in Florida. I work full-time as a special education behavior specialist, and I work with an ABA company on the side. They're called Full Spectrum ABA. I work as an RBT and as their blogger and autistic advocate. I'm one of the many autistic advocates in their program through Full Spectrum. So it's really cool about that. what I love is that I still get to implement ABA therapy. I do it in the home setting and I do it in schools. So it's awesome. And I've been helping with creating behavior plans and everything through the school districts. So I'm getting that experience and everything, and just coming up with more teaching individualized skills that will enhance quality of life. And that's so important. I know, I feel like for me, it's just giving back to how much I've had support in my life to enhance quality of life for more people that are neurodiverse.
Some of that stuff I knew, some of it I'm just learning. But honestly, your story is like so empowering because you had opportunities, if you wanted to kind of like bow out and be like, no, I'm going to go pursue a different career. I'm going to do something else with my life. But instead you were like, no, I had ABA services and I loved what I got out of it. And now you're seeing it again when you're going to, to school as a paraprofessional, and you're like, no, I could do this. I could do this for the rest of my life. I know for me personally, and Brianna's definitely been in those shoes before, the job of an RBT and even a BCBA is not easy. What we do has its definitely difficult days. It's not all rainbows and sunshine all the time. But I think the aftermath of seeing the progress and knowing that you're affecting someone else's life, you're improving their quality of life, you can't beat that. And I don't think that there's many careers out there that feel as good as what we do. And that's not me putting down any other careers, but I just think that there's like a special connection that we have with our learners and our coworkers because, you're all kind of like riding through this journey together. And I love the fact that, again, like you had opportunities to say, you know what, I've had enough of it, I'm good. But you were like, no, I'm going to go all the way with this. I did have a question though. So like when you said you grew up in Brooklyn, correct?
I was born in Brooklyn, but actually grew up in New Jersey. My family and I moved in 2001. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was kind of like the journey with, I guess, growing up in New Jersey and then moving to Florida? Like, was there many challenges with like your environment, or like maybe some different stuff that was a little too like overstimulating for you? Was there like a change in the environment that affected you in any way, or like change your perspective?
So that's a really good question. I will say that when my family and I first moved to New Jersey, like I was placed in a specialized school called Children's Center of Monmouth County. I was there first based on my challenges that I had and everything. When things started to change for me when I was 7 years old, I started to have more awareness of my environment and everything. Like I felt like things were starting to click in my brain. That school's child study team in the meeting were like, she's ready to go into a public school district. Like, let's push her into a public school district. My parents were a little concerned, but they knew from my face, like my facial expressions, even though like I couldn't verbally talk too much at that time, they knew I was ready. Like they knew like in my face that I wanted
Yeah, like you had
more.
you had the understanding and ability to want to.
Yes, exactly. So in 3rd grade, I started attending the Marlboro Public School District, and I loved my teacher that I have. And ever since then, I still keep connection with her online, which I'm so grateful about that. It was definitely a big change in regards to like being in the new school environment and everything. Like I was very shy. In terms of communication, that was still being worked on. I actually had a keyboard as an accommodation to be able to type things out when I couldn't verbally communicate it. So that was my accommodation at the time then. And also at that time, I didn't even have like ABA therapy anymore. I only had ABA therapy until like the end of 2nd grade. That's how long it lasted. It lasted for quite a few years. The school was able to work with me on those kind of skills, even though now is turning to more focus on academics, because that's what I was lacking when I was at Children's Center, that it wasn't really academics. It was more on life skills and working on like communication and all that. So that was the first focus. And then now being in the public school setting, it was very different for me. So it was a lot to learn and everything. And also navigating like friendships and everything. That was very tricky. I didn't know like how to do that. I needed to be taught how to do that. So what was great is that fast forward in time, when I was in middle school, my speech therapist actually created a social skills program for students with disabilities in my school building. So I was pulled out once a week for just having a social skills group and like working on skills like how to make friends, to dealing with certain situations in school that come up. It was great that I still kind of had that touch, like when I had the social skills group when I was in middle school, and I still thank my speech therapist back then to this day. I've also learned like over time how much that there are fields that really do connect with one another. As in RBT today, like I know that I could network with other people, like with speech therapists to others in the field, because really we're all trying to impact one individual's life. Like that's, we all have like those similar goals and everything in regards to communication and life skills and everything. Like it's not that far different.
Yeah, I think that's really a good thing to note because, you know, all the service providers that have had an impact on your life from early intervention all the way through, you know, your school career. And I think sometimes us in the ABA world, we might get a bad reputation with some of the other service providers, like, oh, you know, they don't want to work with the BCBAs because maybe the last BCBA didn't want to collaborate. But I think that's awesome that you see it from that perspective, from the student perspective, and you're able to kind of see all those pieces. So what do you think would be your best piece of advice for us in the ABA world when it comes to working with other service professionals?
When it comes to working with other service professionals, it's very important to focus on like an individual's skills, like always focus on their strengths, because we don't want to always focus on like what they're lacking. We also want to focus on like what they already have the abilities of. And then let's just collaborate on like goals of how can we use their strengths to pretty much improve the areas that we want to increase abilities with, like with communication. A lot of times, like I'll give an example, personal example of a client of mine that they actually communicate better with singing. So whenever they sing, they're much more vocal when they're singing than not. We also have to remember that as providers and everything, that like every single individual that we work with is so different. And so it has to be really individualized and also focus on, as I've mentioned, like use the strengths that they have already and create goals from that to be improve areas that, you know, that we want to increase, such as with communication.
I think individuals with autism or adults with autism, there's kind of like a negative connotation when it comes to ABA. Not every adult with autism feels like they got the best of ABA, or maybe they feel like it failed them in some way. Can you kind of speak to like your experience of the positive ABA?
I will say as a heads up that I did have a lot of challenges when I was younger, so I don't recall too much, but we all know like how much the field has evolved and everything. It's based on like how much is learned and like a lot of education and advocacy and everything. So to share also from my parents' perspective is that the therapist that I had at the time, like they truly spent time with me, like good quality time with me and everything, always working on skills that I needed to enhance my quality of life, like communication, for example. Yes, at the time that there was a lot of food reinforcers being used, but there are things that motivate others and reinforcers depend on the individual. So we have to really focus on with that. I know for me is that the most important thing for good services to happen is having a good quality therapist that truly believes in a client. And I know mine back at the time believed in me so much and worked with me a lot. So that's what I feel like has been the positive for me. And I validate everybody's experiences and stuff because, you know, everybody's experiences is so different. And at the same time, like, we have to look at the overall picture of how much things have changed. So it's not the same as it was. Like ABA today is not even the same as it was 20 years ago when I even got it. A lot has changed from it.
And what's so interesting too, like as you were bringing up, like, oh, you said you went to Children's Center, you grew up in Marlboro. I'm only like a half hour away in Howell, and I grew up in Howell around the same time. And even thinking about in that public school setting, I didn't know what ABA was. I didn't know what ABA was until college, and knowing that, people in my school or somewhere were receiving ABA services. You were having that experience while I was having, a different school experience, and never even knew what it was until less than 10 years ago. It's cool to see it all come full circle.
Oh, absolutely.
Honestly, it's been awesome talking to you. It's been amazing. Again, hearing your story from you firsthand versus like reading it online. If you could kind of leave the world with a message, or if there's something like you feel like you've learned in your life that you could speak to, what's something that you could tell others about?
I want others to know that they're awesome in their own ways. Everybody has so many different abilities, special interests, and all of that. So definitely use them to your advantage to be able to make a difference in the world, because that's really what it takes, especially for providers. Like when it comes to working with clients in our population, that being super patient and being yourself, it makes such a big difference. And the more that we're ourselves, I feel like it truly impacts everybody's lives. That's my takeaway from that, for people to know.
And honestly, that's a great takeaway to have. Thank you so much for giving us the time, for speaking with us, for telling us your story, a little bit of background about you. I think we would love another opportunity to speak to you again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, as you stated before, like we all have our roles to play, but it's all about how do we work together.
Yes, Michelle, thank you so much. We really appreciate this, and we really hope to connect again soon.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love that.